to Ideas at Work and Beyond. You know, sometimes the good guys win. And that's exactly what's happened in the state of Connecticut this past week. On this very show, you know, sometimes I wonder if this show has any juice, if it has any power at all. But last week on this very show, in this studio, we had Monsignor Lawrence Bronkovich from Ridgefield, Connecticut, talking about the state government's ill-advised attack on the Catholic Church in Connecticut. You'll remember it started back in March when two legislators came out and said, you know what we need to do? We've done such a good job of running the state of Connecticut, where now we're up to $8 billion in deficit, and they still don't have a budget done. But since we're so good at keeping track of money and running things, we think it's best that if the government should come in, pierce the separation of church and state, and run the budgets of the Catholic Church on a parish-by-parish basis. Well, of course, this was met by outrage. There were over 4,000 members of the Catholic Church that stormed Hartford, and they turned tail and ran like frightened caribou out on the plains. And then next, after that, they went after the Catholic Church with a complaint with the State Ethics Agency. The State Ethics Agency. What was their complaint? Their complaint was that the Catholic Church put up like $1,200 or so to put the buses together to help get people to Hartford to express their right of protest. Well, just this past week, after Monsignor Bronkovich, maybe in a small way, had an effect on this show, that complaint of the State Ethics Committee has been absolutely thrown out. I hope that the legislators in Hartford have decided to leave the Catholic Church alone, tend to their own business, get a budget passed that isn't raising taxes like there's no tomorrow and causing the hardworking people of Connecticut to have to work through June 6th of every year just to pay their state, federal, and local taxes. That's what they should be focusing on. Keep your cotton-picking hands off the Catholic Church and out of the Church's business in general. So that's this past week. The good guys won. The Catholic Church, once again, is free and clear to do the good work that they do. I take my hat off to Monsignor Bronkovich and all the Catholic Church, and just keep spreading the gospel like you do, and focus on that. This evening, I've been incredibly excited about having this man. He'll tell you, I've hounded him. I think I've almost broken some state stalking, cyber stalking, what have you. But we are delighted to have former congressman, former CIA agent. This is really sort of the melding of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, James Bond, and maybe a little Barney Fife in there. I'm not sure. But we're delighted to have Congressman Rob Simmons on our show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I just have to make a comment about your thoughts on the Catholic Church. It was my honor to serve in the Connecticut General Assembly for 10 years, 5 terms, from Stonington, North Stonington, which is way on the other side of the state. And I know a lot of the legislators, and you know, they're good, decent folks. In fact, your mayor, Mark Boughton, sat a few seats from me, and he's gone on to do just a terrific job here in Danbury. But why? At a time when deficits are through the roof, at a time when revenues are down, at a time when people are being foreclosed out of their homes, at a time when unemployment has doubled over the last 2 years here in Connecticut, at a time when businesses are folding and leaving and taxes are up and energy costs are up, why would anybody want to reorganize the Catholic Church, an institution that's been around for thousands of years? And why would anybody in the government think that they have any right whatsoever to tell them how to run their business? And oh, by the way, the Vatican owns probably, I believe, I'm told, the largest stock portfolio in the world.
Is that right?
The largest portfolio of equities in the world. Who is the Connecticut General Assembly to tell them how to run their business? I'd like to know. If there's one person in the church who's made a mistake, then you go after that person. You don't reorganize the whole church. And it's kind of like in the Navy. In the Navy, if you're the captain of a submarine or a ship and you hit a rock, you don't rewrite the regulations.
Right.
You fire the captain.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what happened. I mean, there's a few schools of thought on this whole thing with the Catholic Church. One school of thought says, well, it was one pastor and a rogue pastor in a church, I believe it was in Darien, who took money from the church and lived high off the hog, and he's been caught and persecuted, and my understanding is he's in jail right now.
Was he persecuted or prosecuted?
Well, I'm sorry,
absolutely.
He was prosecuted.
There's an important difference.
Well, I think the persecution happened after the prosecution.
We want to make sure he's prosecuted, not persecuted.
He was prosecuted, but I think the persecution took place after the prosecution.
There we go.
And that's what happened with the Catholic Church. But there's, those that speculate a bit more may say that, this was some type of attack against the Catholic Church for their pro-life stance, their stance against gay marriage, and some of these things. Yeah. So there could have been a hidden agenda at work here going after it. But if there was, it certainly hasn't worked.
Let me repeat my comments.
Please.
If there's a hidden agenda, to me, that makes it even worse.
Oh, yeah.
At a time when we have record deficits, unemployment, mortgage crisis, financial services crisis, at a time when Connecticut residents and Americans generally are feeling a little insecure about the future, why go after the church?
I don't know.
Politically, it's foolish, in my opinion, and substantively flawed.
I agree.
Sitting down in my hometown, and I used to be the business advocate until January of this year. Yeah. But they cut back. They eliminated my position to balance the budget or whatever.
Ouch! You were cut. Governor Rell put your head on the chopping block?
It was the legislature that did it.
Okay.
They introduced the bill, and she eventually she signed the bill, of course. But there was a lot of stuff in there. She really didn't have much choice.
So your position was cut.
Eliminated.
Wow.
They cut it right out of the law.
Downsized.
Well, downsized.
That hurts.
Well, it was kind of a bit of a surprise.
Okay, but you're on the rebound.
But one door closes and another door opens.
All right. Well, there should be a door opening to the United States Senate in 2010. That's what you're running for. But before we go to that, the number here is 792-4101. 792-4101. If you have a question for former congressman who served in the United States Congress from 2001 to 2007 and is now a candidate for the United States Senate against Senator Chris Dodd, and that election is coming up in 2010.
That is correct.
How's it going?
It couldn't be better.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Look, I served for 6.5 years in the Senate as a staff person. Right. Many years ago, I served with Senator John Chafee of Rhode Island and Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona. Huh. For Chafee, I was an intern and a legislative assistant, so I did legislation, veterans, defense, and foreign policy. For Goldwater, I was staff director of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So I had, in a very short period of time, I had a very diverse...
Not to interrupt you, but what was Barry Goldwater like?
Fabulous.
Really?
Just an amazing
I mean, was he gruff and over the top, or...?
He would call me every morning at about 8 o'clock. He'd get into the office at 6. He would dictate letters for 2 hours and would not be disturbed. You could not disturb him. And promptly at 8, as soon as he finished his dictation, he would call me, and I learned to be at the phone. Because he would call, and he expected me to answer. Right. He would not ask his secretary to call and have my secretary answer.
I see.
He was a very direct, amazing guy. He wrote his own speeches. He was a photographer. He collected Kachina dolls, which are those amazing Navajo dolls. And in fact, if you looked at his knuckles, he had tattoos on his knuckles that were put on by the
Prison
Navajo.
tattoos?
No, these by the Navajo. He was inducted into the Navajo tribe as far as you can go and still be a non-Native American. Wow. I mean, he was so respected.
I mean, looking back at that election when he ran against Lyndon Johnson, and they had that girl plucking the daisy, and they had the mushroom cloud behind.
Terrible.
That seemed like a pretty rough ad. That was around the last week or so of the campaign, and he ended up losing.
It characterized him as a warmonger. I mean, look, he was a World War II veteran. He was a Major General in the U.S. Air Force. That's a hell of a lot more than Lyndon Johnson ever was. but he was very serious about foreign policy. I was graduating from college within a few months of that election, and quite frankly, I remember Lyndon Johnson saying, I don't want American boys to fight a war that Asian boys should fight.
Right.
So he'd taken the anti-Vietnam War position, whereas Goldwater essentially said, I won't rule out the use of nuclear weapons in any war.
Right.
Which was interpreted to mean he might use nuclear weapons against Vietnam. Well, there's no target to use them against Vietnam. It was an insurgency. So to think that he was going to use nuclear weapons against Vietnam was, in my opinion, somewhat ridiculous. But within 3 months of that election, I got my draft notice. And that's when I realized that sometimes these political candidates say things in elections that they don't really mean.
Well, then Lyndon Johnson went on to grossly escalate the war in Vietnam under Defense Secretary McNamara, as I recall. So he started what John F. Kennedy started as a rather small thing, and it was escalated.
Kennedy had advisors. And then you had the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was a rigged deal, where Lyndon Johnson said we were attacked by the North Vietnamese. The whole thing was rigged, and that led to the escalation of the war. But I will tell you this.
And meanwhile, he gets reelected as president,
of course,
on an anti-war platform.
Indeed.
And paints your boy Goldwater as a warmonger.
Well, he did.
Politics is a heck of a game.
Well, Goldwater went on to earn the love and the trust of the nation. You know, he was honest. He told the truth. And years later, when Ronald Reagan was elected, and the inauguration was in January of 1981, the Reagan folks invited Richard Nixon to sit up on the platform with Jerry Ford and with Barry Goldwater. Right up front. And Goldwater heard about it, and he said, wait a minute, Nixon is going to sit up there? And they said, yes. He's a former Republican president. He said, if he's there, I'm not there.
Really?
Because he said Nixon lied to the American people. Now, Goldwater respected Jerry Ford. Even though he pardoned Nixon, that was a very courageous thing to do. He pardoned Nixon, and he lost the next election because of it. So Goldwater respected Jerry Ford as being an honest man, if not that slick a politician. But Nixon, he didn't like him because he lied. He lied about the tapes. He lied about Watergate. He lied about so Goldwater was not going to sit up there with Nixon.
Interesting. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a question for the congressman. I know he's going to run for Congress for office in 2010. Does he think that because Chris Murphy is a young, charismatic guy, that could be against him? Because there's like a sense around the nation that they want the politicians, I mean, besides Obama, but they want young, fresh blood, or they want somebody young there.
Well,
thanks for the call. It's a good question.
Yeah, thanks very much.
What about that? Young blood?
Well, Chris Murphy, I think, is well set to run for Congress next year. My race would be against Senator Chris Dodd. He and I are about the same age. And we've had somewhat different life experiences. Mine was in the U.S. Army and the Central Intelligence Agency. His has been pretty much politics. But you know, Murphy is going to have a challenge from Justin Bernier from Farmington. A very bright, young, capable person who's military. He's Navy. He actually served in Afghanistan in the Navy. And I asked him one time, I said, how did you get the Navy ships into Afghanistan? Well, obviously they didn't. He was a naval intelligence officer in Afghanistan. So I think Murphy's going to have his hands full.
Now let's talk a little bit about Chris Dodd. Chris Dodd seems to be, we were talking about this on the way up here, and I said that Chris Dodd is, the Dodd family is to Connecticut, what the Kennedy family is to Massachusetts. Is that fair to say? I mean, wasn't his father a senator as well?
His father was a senator. I don't think any member of his family has been president, although he ran for president.
Yeah, he actually moved
to Iowa. Yeah, put his daughter in school out there, which my wife is a public school teacher here in Connecticut, in New London. We just shook our heads at that. When does a presidential candidate move to a state like Iowa for the Iowa caucus. I mean, sure, you go there, you get a hotel room.
I mean, I understand
but you don't tell everybody you're moving there.
I mean, look at the trouble that that South Carolina governor got in for just going to Argentina for a long weekend.
Well, wait a minute.
You know, I mean, here we have a U.S. senator that goes out to Iowa and moves his whole family out.
Well,
that's a little presumptuous.
At least he went out with his family.
He did go out with his family.
We got to give credit where credit is due.
That's where my analogy breaks down.
But you know, that's just not right. And I come from a part of the state that has long been supportive of Senator Dodd. I mean, his family was from the Norwich area. He owned a house in North Stonington. He practiced law in New London. And so the Dodd family is no stranger to Eastern Connecticut. But the talk about that move to Iowa was everywhere. Barbershop, post office out at the dump.
I mean, was there a sense that he was sort of taking the voters of Connecticut for granted? The idea is like, hey, this is a job for life.
Absolutely.
I might as well be, you know, British royalty. I was born to the manor, and my dad had it. He gave it to me, and I'm the state.
And where did anybody in Connecticut say, Senator, you know, we really want you to run for president?
Yeah. No,
I mean, was there a groundswell of support for that? I didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it either.
It was a decision he made really on his own, I think.
Okay, let me just ask. And again, the number is 792-4101. We have a former CIA agent, former United States congressman, former Vietnam veteran, and an all-around great guy. So he will answer your questions straight up, and he's just a great person to have on the show. This most recent economic downturn, now I'm going to say some things, you correct me, you tell me where I'm wrong, but we had Nick Perna, he's a celebrated economist, he's on the governor's...
Very capable guy.
Very capable guy, and I sort of outlined the way I saw this whole economic meltdown take place, and a lot of it had to do with the Senate Banking Committee with Senator Dodd and Senator Barney Frank there allowing some of these subprime mortgages to go through because, after all, Fannie and Freddie Mac were going to buy them up. And oh, by the way, these quasi-private public banks also donate money to campaigns. And oh, by the way, the person that receives the most donations from these quasi-banks happen to be Senator Dodd, Barack Obama, and Barney Frank. Long story short, it seems like they were in bed with this whole subprime mortgage thing to begin with. These banks were able to initiate these mortgages, sell them off to Freddie Mac, and then have them insured by AIG, and the whole thing sort of came to a close. Now, I'm wondering, is there enough anger out there, and is it directed, what I believe rightfully, at Barney Franks and Senator Dodd regarding this economic meltdown? Or is it so befuddled that you're going to say, well, it was George Bush's fault, he's gone, Barack Obama's there now, we're going to work our way out of it, everything's going to be okay? Is anything I said wrong?
I think your analysis and your presentation is pretty correct.
Really?
And there are pieces of it that you could add to. The Carter administration and Clinton administration did the Community Reinvestment Act. That was designed to extend what you might call subprime mortgages into red line or red zone areas where people were not as economically viable as they might be in other neighborhoods. Why did these administrations want to do that? They wanted to share home ownership with a larger group of citizens. I
guess it was a noble motivation.
It was a noble motivation, but it wasn't economically sound. And the banks initially didn't want to do it. But the banks were pressured to do that. In fact, the banks were scored on their loans in red line areas, and if you didn't score well, you were subject to some pretty adverse hearings and criticism. So the banks were forced to do some of these subprime loans, but the kicker was that they could package them and sell them to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Right. So there was no downside for them.
So they could bail out the loan. They could sell the loan in a package to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Now, Fannie Mae, Freddie, any bank out there has to maintain about 10% of reserves against mortgages and other loans in case of a crisis. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac maintained a 2% reserve. And that issue came up repeatedly in hearings in 2005 and 6. That reserve is too low. The numbers of subprime mortgages is increasing. This balloon is getting bigger and bigger, and we're afraid it's going to pop. And the testimony from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac was, look, we maintain a low reserve, but our investments are all in real estate, and real estate is solid, and real estate has been going up, therefore it's safe.
Yeah, well...
and then what would happen is the legislators on the, Senator Dodd on the Banking Committee and Barney Frank over in the Finance Committee would bring in these executives from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and have a hearing, and they would ask the question, is everything okay? Everything's just fine.
Yeah.
And then they'd cancel the hearing and go out to a fundraiser.
Yeah, yeah.
And these guys would give them literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in fundraising dollars. So
now let's talk politics. I agree with you. I agree with you. Is any of that sticking?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is. And I think in the case of Senator Dodd, look, you remember a couple of months ago, the Hartford Courant, which generally speaking is pretty supportive of the senator. They've always endorsed him. They're in the process now of trying to resurrect him. But, above the fold, Dodd's flip-flop, that was on the AIG bonuses. Then they've done articles on the cottage. Then they did an article on the mortgage. Now, when you say
the cottage, we're not talking about a nice little screen porch up on a lake in Connecticut. Where is this cottage?
It's in Ireland. It's
Ireland, the country of Ireland?
The country of Ireland.
The country
of Ireland. County Galway, I believe.
Okay.
It's a 10-acre island with a causeway. And
I love Google. Google Senator Dodd cottage. See what comes up.
And actually, with
how much are senators paid?
About $156,000 a year.
Do you think he could afford a cottage in Ireland on $160,000 a year?
No, he didn't. This is part of it, and the people know this. A business friend who was indicted and convicted of stock fraud was given a pardon by President Clinton, negotiated by Senator Dodd directly with the White House. Didn't go through the Justice Department. This individual then got his business pal to go in on the cottage. And the business pal bought the majority share and sustained it for a period of time, and Dodd eventually bought him out. But the cottage was carried on his ethics disclosure form at $100,000 to $200,000.
And what's his really worth?
That's $700,000 in a down market.
Wow.
People over there say it's worth over $1 million. So there are enough things here that haven't been made up by me, or made up by you, or made up by Chris Healy, that it begins to stick. And people begin to realize that he's been serving himself.
So maybe on international real estate deals there might be something shady, but at least his mortgage and second mortgages with that bank, you remember that bank, it was countrywide.
Where's the mortgage?
Yeah.
Show me the mortgage.
Yeah.
What
are the dealings with that one?
Well, again, this gets into the sweetheart relationship between a senior senator, chairman of a committee, powerful committee that oversees the housing and the banking industry, gets a sweetheart VIP mortgage worth about $75,000 from Angelo Mozilla, the head of Countrywide, who's been the target of an investigation and now is indicted.
Wow.
Now, when I worked for Senator Goldwater...
Is Countrywide in business anymore?
Yes, they're under investigation.
Okay.
When I worked for Senator Goldwater, and he was chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, we had a responsibility to oversee the intelligence community. That is a day-to-day thing. And you can't have, and he did not have, a sweetheart relationship with, let's say, Bill Casey, the director of the CIA, or some other CIA officer. You had to maintain your distance, you had to be impartial, you had to make sure that the public policy of the United States of America was consistent with our laws and our culture and our ethics. Now, for Senator Dodd to be raking in money from the banking industry at the same time he oversees them is incredible. In fact, just this past weekend, he had a fundraiser at Goodspeed Opera House over in East Haddam. And a few days before the event, a flyer went out from the Connecticut Banking Association to all of the senior executives of every bank in Connecticut saying, there's going to be a fundraiser, it's going to be at such and such a time, and the implication was, better be there.
Yeah, like to see you pony up.
Like to see you there.
Yeah.
Better be there.
And these are banks that have business with the federal government.
These are Connecticut banks trying to do the best they can in a bad economy, and the chairman of the banking committee, essentially through his surrogate, through the Connecticut Banking Association, is saying, hey, get over there, throw some money in the bucket. I'm sorry, but, you know, that just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I think Connecticut residents feel the same way.
I agree. Now, okay, so here you are. You were a U.S. congressman, former CIA agent, former, a Vietnam veteran. You're running. You've been able to attract some interest. And what are some of the polls saying? I mean, Senator Dodd is a very powerful, nationally known United States senator. Surely a challenge from the Republican Party, which I guess is, you know, has fallen out of favor and stuff like that, wouldn't have any traction. Yet, what are some of these Quinnipiac polls that have come out? What are they saying?
Well, there have been 3 or 4 polls in a row. Each of the Quinnipiac polls has had me in the lead. The first one I was up by 1 or 2 points. The second I was up by 16. The third I was up by 6. Recently, Peter Schiff, who's considering entering the race, did a poll. His published results had me up by 7 or 8. There have been some private polls that have been done that I've taken a look at that have me up by 6 or 7. Now, look, the election is a year from now. It's a long way to go. Senator Dodd is obviously scared. He said initially he wasn't going to campaign this year, that he had to tend to business in Washington. Within a week of that statement, he's got $250,000 of ads running. Now it's over $500,000. Plus he's got some other folks doing ads for him. So what he's trying to do, I think, is try to get his numbers up with these with about $500,000 worth of ads.
Wow.
I've not spent any money on ads, and I really don't intend to spend any money on ads right away. My intent would be to raise money and wait until next year. I mean, we'll have to see how it goes. But clearly he's in trouble, not because of Rob Simmons or because of the Republican Party. He's in trouble because he has engaged in activities that the people of Connecticut don't approve. You know, my career began as a military officer, and on the back of my card I have a quote from the officer's guide that I got when I got my commission as a young lieutenant from the infantry school. The Code of Ethics for Government Service holds that, and I quote, "Public office is a public trust." Public office is a public trust, and when you put the bars on, when you swear the oath to the Constitution, you know, you accept power and influence, but not for yourself. It's for the people you serve. A military officer has rank and privilege to make him or her more effective as a leader of military people, perhaps in a war zone. I spent 20 months in Vietnam. I had tremendous responsibilities as a young guy for the people under my command. And so, yeah, I was a second and a first lieutenant, and I had certain privileges and powers, but that was for the mission that we had to accomplish. Same in the CIA, same as a representative in the Connecticut General Assembly. You know, serving as a representative is not just putting a license plate on your car. It's pledging to help the people of your district and whatever problem they may have. I used to have people call me to ask for phone numbers. Call up, I'm trying to reach the Department of Transportation. Well, it's in the phone book. Well, look, I'll get it for you. When I was a congressman in Washington, D.C., we had the responsibility for the men and women in uniform, that they have body armor, and that they have up-armor Humvees, and that they have medical care. I mean, these are men and women who put their lives on the line for the country. And so for me, my whole life, public office has been a public trust. That's the standard to which I have set for myself. And I believe that Senator Dodd has taken that standard and turned it somewhat for his own benefit. And I think that people are aware of that. it's certainly been in the newspapers.
Yeah.
And people are upset. And I'm not sure that $1 million or $2 or $3 million of ads are really going to gloss it over and take it away.
Our guest this evening on Ideas of Work and Beyond is Congressman Rob Simmons. We're going to take a break right now and go to news and weather, and we'll be right back. Our number again, 792-4101, and we'll be right back with the Congressman. Thanks for watching.
Now, from the studios of Comcast Channel 23, this is a news update with anchors Austin Greenfield and Jim Masters. The latest news, sports, and weather from around the entire greater Danbury region. And now, Austin Greenfield and Jim Masters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of News and Weather on Ideas of Work and Beyond. I am weathercaster Austin Greenfield alongside newscaster Jim Masters. I'll have your weather in just a moment, but first, Jim, what's going on around the news in the local area?
Lots going on around Danbury. For example, in Danbury, the distant beat of drums and the plaintive wail bagpipes grew louder as the Danbury Police Department marched down Main Street in front of a hearse bearing the colleague officer Robert DiNardo. In a Tuesday morning sunlight-dressed event, uniformed officers lined both sides of the stairs into St. Peter's Church. DiNardo's wife, Jackie, and their children Amanda, Robert Jr., and Nicholas, and extended family followed the flag-draped coffin into the full church for the funeral mass. Robert DiNardo died June 25th at age 55 after a long battle with cancer. Officers lined the center aisle as 3 priests accompanied the coffin to the front of the church, and the mourners followed to the voice of soloist Martha Ryerson. A dozen candles with unwavering flames sat on the altar, and above them a lovely soft light shone through 3 large stained glass windows. DiNardo, a Western Connecticut State University graduate, was a 29-year veteran of the Danbury Police Department, with 20 of those years as the community police officer at Broadview Middle School. And in 2000, he was chosen City Police Officer of the Year and National DARE Officer of the Year. DiNardo also coached youth sports, including the Danbury High School girls basketball teams and the 1999 Bambino World Series championship team, on which his older son played. Danbury grants nonprofit agencies materials and monies. In Danbury, some nonprofit officials said they didn't receive as much city grant money this week as they have in previous years, but they were happy to get what they could. About $500,000 in city grants to nearly 24 nonprofit organizations were announced this week. The grants, which were normally determined as part of the annual budget process, were instead this year distributed by Volunteer Citizens Board, overseen by the United Way of Western Connecticut. And Patricia Shar, the Senior Development and Community Relations Officer for the American Red Cross of Western Connecticut, said the Red Cross received a city grant of about $11,000. That's about $8,000 less than last year. And a Danbury boxer gets a shot at the world title. The last time Delvin Rodriguez was in training camp, he admitted for the first time in his boxing career his motivation waned, his desire diminished. But today, Rodriguez has returned to New York's Catskill Mountains and is having no such issues. The 29-year-old's long-awaited world title shot is less than a month away, and the Danbury boxer is back in training camp as well. The purse is going to be $136,000, and it's going to be happening at the Mohegan Sun Arena on August 1st. And Rodriguez says he's happy and he's excited. He's originally from the Dominican Republic, and he came to Danbury at age 10. He said, "Finally, everything I've worked for, so hard for, has come to fruition," and we wish him the best of luck. And we also want everybody to go out and watch one of those great Danbury Westerners games. We've been to a lot of those games too. Support the local sports team out there as well. Lots of great games coming up throughout the season.
That's right.
And good weather, hopefully, for those games, right, Austin?
Yeah, good weather. Maybe not tomorrow, but at least after that, into the weekend. And
4th of July coming up?
4th of July should be okay. Maybe a shower or a thunderstorm.
Okay, take us through it.
Taking a look at the detailed forecast for tonight, we could see a shower or a thunderstorm, but basically those showers and thunderstorms are going to be before the midnight hour. After that, some patchy fog could develop. We'll see lows around 61 degrees for the day Friday. Again, we're going to see those chances of afternoon showers and thunderstorms. Some of those storms could produce heavy rainfall. We'll see highs in the upper 70s. And then Friday night, again, we'll see those showers and thunderstorms before the midnight hour. Mostly cloudy skies. We'll see lows in the upper 50s. And then for your Independence Day, maybe a shower or thunderstorm, not as widespread as Friday or today, but again, you could still see that chance of a shower or thunderstorm. But please don't cancel any outdoor activities. Don't cancel your fireworks because more likely than not, it's not going to happen. We'll see highs in the upper 70s. And then Sunday and to Monday, we'll see mostly sunny skies. No chances of showers or thunderstorms, which is good news. We'll see highs in the upper 70s. And then again, Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to see a return those chances of afternoon showers and thunderstorms with highs in the upper 70s. Then Thursday should be mostly sunny day with highs in the mid-70s.
So 70s, 80s, possible rain here and there, but for the 4th of July, looking pretty good then.
4th of July should be okay.
That's terrific, terrific. Well, that's our report right now for Comcast Cable Channel 23, News and Weather. Austin Greenfield, I'm Jim Masters. Much more of Ideas at Work and Beyond with Marty Heiser coming right up. We wish you a fantastic 4th of July holiday weekend, and we'll see you again.
Good evening and welcome back to Ideas at Work and Beyond. We're delighted to have former Congressman Rob Simmons here, who is a candidate against the sitting United States Senator Chris Dodd, who seems to be in a little bit of trouble, depending on who you talk to. But who we always talk to is Al Robinson, the founder, the editor of Hat City Blog, the blog that strikes terror into the hearts of politicians far and wide. Al, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And you had some questions for our guests.
Yes, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Al.
Right. Well, I know you're running for Senate, and we have a couple other candidates who are potentially might be running for Senate. I know you talked about Peter Schiff, and there's a possibility that State Senator Sam Caligiuri might get into the race as well.
Yeah, Larry Kudlow has been talked about?
Yeah, he's been talked about.
Okay.
So I want to try to get away a little bit from speaking on Chris Dodd, and let's speak about why you feel you would be the best individual to represent the Republican Party in the general election. So real briefly, if you can tell the audience why you feel you're the best candidate, the best fit for the Republican nomination.
Absolutely. And we can go back to a little bit of my career as a military officer. I'm not sure any of the other candidates have that experience. I've always felt that that was important, especially at a time when we have war or the risk of war around the world. Thank God our troops are beginning to withdraw out of Iraq. I think that's a positive sign, although I'm cautious as they come out. I think we have to be cautious as they come out to make sure that the turnover to the Iraqi security forces is done professionally. I mentioned Justin Bernier, who served in Afghanistan. We have a serious problem in Afghanistan. I'm not sure the strategy that we've used there in the past has been effective. We've done drug eradication in Afghanistan, and yet drugs are responsible for 60% of the economy of that country. It seems to me that we have to figure out an interim policy to survive the tribal leaders, to draw them away from the Taliban and get them into an economy that is more congenial. And I've proposed actually buying drugs from them to take them away from the Taliban, whether we use those drugs for medicinal purposes in this country or simply stockpile or destroy them. At least that's a way of sustaining the support of those tribal leaders, because Afghanistan is a very different country from Iraq.
Right.
So I think the military background and experience is important. Obviously, I'm a veteran, and I've done a lot of work with veterans, and that's something that I have that I don't think Senator Dodd and the other candidates have. I've served in the Senate. I'm not sure that any of the challengers have ever had that experience as an intern, a legislative assistant, and then a staff director of a committee. So I know the rules of the Senate. I know how to make it work. And as you probably know, in the Senate, the minority has rights that you don't have in the House of Representatives.
Right.
In other words, one senator, even in the minority, working under the rules, has substantially more power if they know how to make the rules work than a single representative in the House of Representatives. I've been the business advocate here for the state of Connecticut for 2 years, so I have a very good sense of the needs of small and medium-sized business here in the state of Connecticut. And I believe strongly that the fiscal conservative role is what the average Americans want, the average Connecticut resident wants. There's a lot of concern about the spending. There's a lot of concern about government encroachment on the private sector of our economy, government encroachment in our lives. We just heard earlier in the show about the state of Connecticut taking on the Catholic Church. I'm a great believer in freedom and personal responsibility. That under our Constitution, our forefathers and foremothers gave us this document that was determined to allow us to be free, but required us to be responsible for our choices. And I think that's a model that more and more Connecticut residents are looking at as a model that they agree with. Most recently, I attended 3 tea parties, one in New Haven, one in Hartford, and one in Norwich. And what I saw was a lot of hard-working, middle-class Connecticut residents like me, families with children, veterans like myself, and others who are concerned about the spending, who are concerned about the taxes, who are concerned about generally the government encroachment in our lives. And I think my background and experience is well suited to address those issues.
Yeah, hold on, one on the follow-up. Caller, you're on the air?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Simmons.
Yes.
How do you feel about legalizing marijuana?
Oh, good question. And then we'll go back to your question. What about that? Legalizing marijuana, are we going to buy all the drugs from the Afghans? Or what about,
I said for medicinal purposes. In other words,
okay.
we use opium poppies, I believe, to make certain narcotics for surgery and other sorts of things. I have opposed legalizing marijuana, although I've had some lengthy discussions with people who want to legalize marijuana for what they call medicinal purposes. Right. I think that if we move in that direction, it has to be under the supervision of a doctor. For example, my father-in-law died a few years ago of cancer. My mother-in-law just last summer of cancer. They both were in tremendous pain in the last few months of their lives. And as a son-in-law, my wife and I ministered to them because they lived up the road from us in Stonington. If there was anything I could do to assist them in dealing with that pain, then I would want to do that. But I wouldn't want to take a policy action with that intent that was loosely structured, so the next thing you know, every high school kid on the street corner is puffing a joint.
Okay. We're going to get back to your question. Caller, you're on the air?
Yes, Colonel Simmons, Peter Green here. Good luck with your campaign, sir.
God bless you.
Question for you, sir. What Major League Professional Baseball team is your favorite? Now, thank you, and hang up. Thank you. Good show, Marty.
Okay, thanks for calling. How about that? It seems like
well, now wants
to know what your favorite
that
team
guy
is.
just threw a grenade into my tent.
This could cost you votes.
Well, I'll be honest, okay? Because honesty is the best policy. I'm a New York Yankees fan.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
I am
Wait
a New York
Wait a second. You're the former congressman from the second Congress.
Now, settle down now. Just settle down.
Not a Red Sox fan?
I was born in New York City. I was raised in Bedford, New York, because my dad's...
The phones are lighting up.
My dad's business was in New York City, but every summer we come up to Connecticut. Now, when my wife and I decided to raise a family, we moved to...
You wanted to raise them right.
We raised them right. We raised them in Stonington, Connecticut, and my son, Robert, is a Red Sox fan. And for him, it's not just baseball, it's religion.
Yeah,
but here's the deal.
I think we have Bill Buckner on the line.
I'm a Yankees fan. He's a Red Sox fan. We live in the same household. We love each other, and that's the way it should be.
I'm getting a little misty.
That's the way it should be.
Caller, you're on the air.
Never let baseball get between family.
Caller, you're on the air.
Right?
I think he gets lost in the congressional district.
Yes, we are. Please. They're talking baseball. It's getting away from us. Go ahead, caller. Bring us back. Bring us back.
I'm getting confused with all the talking. I wanted to ask
Welcome to my life.
This is the first exposure I've had to this man, although he's supposedly running against Chris Dodd, which is an absolute breath of fresh air we need to get rid of the corruption and the criminals in Washington. Please, would he, as a senator for the state and representing our people, at least read the laws that they're enacting that they want us to obey? And what does he think about all this fast-tracking of these terrible, terrible things these people are doing in Washington that are going to cost many generations of Americans tons of money in taxes? And I'll get off the line so he can respond.
Wow, good question. Thank you.
Two very good questions. With regard to the first, reading the bills, when I served in the Connecticut General Assembly, we were confronted with situations like that where we were in a budget crisis in the early 90s. Bills were coming to the floor of the House. They were still hot from the printer. And I told my leadership at the time, and we were in the minority at the time, so we didn't have much control over it, but I told them, I said, if I don't have the time to at least read through the bill and get a sense of what it's all about, and if the debate on the bill is not sufficiently long that I can't satisfy myself as to what's in there, and I can read bills pretty fast, then I'm going to vote against it, no matter how good it may sound. When I went to Washington in the House of Representatives, most of the work of the House was done in committee. And so I got a sense from the committee work what was happening. But what's going on today in the House is they're delivering bills of 1,200 pages and giving the House members 5 or 6 hours to read them before they vote, and they're delivering them at 2 in the morning. This is wrong. The orderly process of government requires that the legislators have time to read it, and if they don't, they should vote no. One other comment. You talked about the speed. Now, the president promised during the campaign that he would post all major legislation online 5 days before it was enacted. That just simply hasn't happened. I worked with Nancy Johnson on the prescription drug bill. That bill took 3 years to bring to fruition. We had a first draft.
You voted in favor of that? I
voted in favor of it, the final bill. The first draft was criticized by the Democrats, correctly so, had problems. We redid it. Nancy did all the work. I just supported her. The second draft came out, some problems, went back and did it again. The third draft went through the House. The vote was open for 5 hours before we got enough votes, and there were Republicans as well as Democrats against it. It went through the Senate, and it's been very successful.
That's how democracy works.
My point is that was the largest amendment of Medicare in 25 years. It took 3 years to do it. How can you take the health care system of the United States of America and tip it on its head and make it a government program in 12, 24, 36, or 48 hours?
Don't worry about it.
This is nuts.
Who's in charge of running that thing?
This is nuts.
Who's in charge of the legislation?
You know, the doctors will tell you the first rule of medicine: do no harm. And you don't even know what harm is being done.
But who is in charge of that at the federal level in the United States Senate?
Well,
Senator Dodd. That's who. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening. Congressman, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
First of all, I love Stonington. I bike around downtown, Old Town Stonington probably once a month. It's a beautiful, looks like Key West without palm trees. I love Stonington.
The village.
The village. Not Mystic. You can have it. It's too touristy.
That's right.
However,
caller, this is a highly professional political show. We don't care about your bike rides. Get to the point.
Well,
listen to the man. He's
sorry. Something about palm trees.
Come on. He's
get to the point, sir.
Congressman, what have you guys done when you and your majority of Republicans had control of the Congress? What did you do to make our lives better as working class people? And also, I think you should make unwanted posters of that corrupt Senator Dodd and put them all over every telephone pole in Connecticut. Unwanted, Chris Dodd, corruption, yellow.
Thanks.
Well,
what about that? Wanted posters for Chris Dodd, a little over the top.
I love those people from Bessel.
I think that you know, we don't need to go there. I don't think in my remarks I've suggested that he's committed any crime. I think what I've suggested is that there's a loss of trust, and the loss of trust may goes to the issue that that he has said certain things that he's then had to retract.
Right.
He's got a sweetheart mortgage which he won't share with us as the people or the media.
Right.
He should share it with you. And so this undermines our trust in him. Let's back up a little bit and look at some of the things that have been done during the period of Republican majority in the House, Senate, and in the White House. And let me explain to the caller first and foremost, I'm not an advocate for one party having all the levers of power.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. You know, I come from a family where my mother is a Democrat, my wife is unaffiliated, and I'm a Republican.
Wow.
My kids are Republicans, and you know we're a family. We love each other. We have our differences, but we love each other.
Yankees, Red Sox.
And well, we have these differences, but we love each other.
I married a Canadian.
Well, there you go.
All right.
So what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of the important policy issues that we're addressing, the economy, jobs, national defense, education, the environment, these don't belong to one party or another. And the best solutions that we can get to these problems are solutions that come from the middle. They don't come from, you know, the extremes. And so the ability to work with others, for example, the Long Island Sound Act that I was the author of and finally got through. It went through because I worked with Steve Israel, a Democrat from New York. Now that was a piece of legislation that preserved and protected some of the really special assets of Long Island Sound and provided funds to clean it up. The submarine base closure. The Bush administration wanted to close the submarine base. I worked with Senator Lieberman, Governor Rell, and others on what we called Team Connecticut.
Right.
We didn't do it at the extremes. We did it by coming together.
Right.
And I think when I look at health care, when I look at Medicare, Medicaid, when I look at Social Security, when I look at jobs in the economy, when I look at national defense, I look at coming up with a solution that can attract others to the center to move forward and have some progress. Because what I see in the state of Connecticut today, and even to an extent in Washington, D.C., is a lack of progress because of the partisanship. We got to get over that.
Right.
Yeah, you have a couple more questions.
Because again, I think you're going to have to, before you can get to Chris Dodd, you got to deal with a few other candidates and get the nomination.
Sure.
So I want to touch on a couple of topics that would pertain to Republicans, because again, you got to win the nomination. So I want to touch on some social issues real quick and find out where you stand on terms of abortion, where you stand at in terms of gay marriage, and also where you. I want to find out also where you stand at on health care, but before we go into that, I just want to find out where do you stand in those two positions?
Yeah, I'm a fiscal conservative, but what you might call a social moderate. I believe in a woman's right to choose and have privacy in her relationships with her doctor and her health care. I think that's an important issue, and that's where I stand on that. I support Connecticut law on that issue. With regard to gay marriage, the state of Connecticut has just passed a law on that subject. I think that's the way to go. I think states need to make those decisions for themselves, and I would certainly abide by the provisions of that law.
So you support gay marriage over civil unions?
Well, it's interesting because I've been involved in this issue over about 16 years. And many years ago, as a member of the Appropriations Committee in Hartford, we were confronted with a situation where a union contract that was inked between the state of Connecticut and a particular union, I forget which one it was, the contract actually extended rights to partners in civil unions. And so the question for the Appropriations Committee was, this represents a different way of looking at these relationships. This was back in the early 90s. And we made the decision at the time to address the issue from the standpoint of funding, which is the responsibility of the Appropriations Committee.
Right.
Do we have money to cover the contract? We did. And so the discussion of the civil unions did not occupy a lot of time, and the bill went through, and I supported it.
Okay.
Over time, I think it's fair to say that Connecticut residents have developed their understanding of this issue. We have gay couples in my church who raise families. My neighbors in Washington, D.C. back in the 80s were a gay couple. I think Americans have come to understand that these relationships are important. And I think the state of Connecticut has moved forward on that.
Just one more real quick. I just want to touch on one other topic. There's a lot of health care legislation being passed around in Washington right now. You somebody who worked with Nancy Johnson on health care. Where do you stand on health care reform? Do you think it needs to be looked on? Do you support the public option? What are your thoughts on health care reform, and what type of legislation would you support?
Yeah, I think we all know that from one perspective, health care in America is pretty good. People come to this country for health care. But when it comes to access, when it comes to quality of care for all citizens, and when it comes to insurance, we've got a long way to go.
Right.
And what I try to do when I look at the health care debate is I try to establish a set of values of what I want in healthcare. First of all, I want the patient and the doctor to be at the center. Not an insurance company, not an attorney, but the patient and the doctor. I think that is the nexus where the debate has to begin and end. Secondly, I would like to see universal coverage of health insurance.
Is this something similar to what's happening in Massachusetts right now?
Yes. And I think that can be done. Just as we have universal coverage for our cars, if you drive a car, you're mandated to have insurance, but you choose the insurance carrier.
Okay.
For me, it's USAA. For somebody else, it might be Aetna. And the same should be true of healthcare. There should be choice in the equation. To have the government do it, lock, stock, and barrel, reminds me of some of the problems of the Veterans Administration, and this is just the most recent case, where a rogue cancer unit did 90% malpractice procedures, and the government covered it up.
Caller, you have a quick question?
Yes, Congressman, what have you done when you guys had control of the Congress to make for working class people to make our lives better?
Jobs.
Specifically, have you done? And this Dodd has to go. He only lies when his lips are moving.
I was business advocate for the state of Connecticut. When I started the job, I decided I'd visit every small business I could, 400 businesses throughout the state. 53% of our businesses in Connecticut are 4 or less employees. 73% are 9 or less employees. If we can't get some stimulus, if we can't get some relief to small business, we're in trouble. And giving the money to the bankers makes it drives me crazy.
Our guest this evening was Congressman Rob
back.
Simmons. We'd love to have him back. Al Robinson, Hat City Blog, check it out. We really appreciate you coming in, and you will be back. Thank you very much. Next couple of weeks going forward, Al Robinson is going to be hosting the show, and he's got some exciting guests coming up. Hopefully Reverend Pitts of New Hope Baptist Church, so we'll see that. And Congressman Simmons, we want you to be back anytime. Thanks again. Thanks for watching, and join us again next week on Ideas at Work and Beyond.